What is up, YouTube? My name is Tim Buell. I'm a professional drummer living in Nashville, Tennessee. And a lot of what I do is record drums here at my home studio. And today I want to talk to you about the 5 mistakes drummers make when recording at home. Every year I build a Spotify playlist just for myself to remember kind of some of the stuff that I played on. So if you want to check out all of the songs I'm about to talk about, you can go to the link in the description. There is a Spotify link down there that takes you to a playlist. But as I went through that list, I was kind of thinking to myself about, some of the things I've learned along the way that helped me record the parts that I recorded on these songs. So I want to talk about 5 different things that I definitely didn't know when I started recording drums at home, and that I think a lot of you might benefit from learning from my mistakes. First mistake that drummers make when they start recording at home is not correcting for phase. It's really, really important, especially as drummers, since we have multiple microphones on the drums, that all the microphones we record with are in phase with each other. When things aren't in phase, it means that frequencies are going to get canceled out. You start losing low end, your kick drums don't sound awesome, your snare drum sounds thin. All of those are what happens when your mics aren't in phase. You might not notice as the drummer, but I guarantee you the producer you're sending those tracks to, and especially the mix engineer, is going to notice you're giving them more work. You're making it more difficult to make your drums sound good. Therefore, it's not as appealing to work with you as it might be someone else. I have a solo project called Metric Deception. There's 2 parts out. You can listen to those on Spotify. They're also in that playlist. And I found that it was worlds easier. Now that I have preamps that all have outboard phase switches, it was so much easier to record that stuff and then mix it, because I do all the editing and mixing myself. Knowing that all of that is in phase, that's something I don't have to do in mixing. It saves whoever's gonna mix your drums so much time if you send them tracks that are already phase aligned. Mistake number 2 that drummers make all the time when they start recording from home. I know I did, and I still do to an extent, but they think way too much like a drummer. When you start recording at home, you really need to start thinking like a producer. As drummers, we're always thinking about, okay, here's the hi-hat part, here's the kick and snare. But when you really listen to the music on the radio right now, especially pop music, there's no cymbals. Sometimes the snare drum is just a snap. So you have to get out of that drummer thinking of what's the ride gonna do? What are the crashes gonna do? Where's the kick and snare? And start thinking more like a producer. Start thinking about what's gonna groove and make this feel good, and what sonic qualities does that stuff need to have. A case in point, there's a song called Nada es Imposible. It's Spanish, hope I'm saying that right. In the early part of the song, I didn't want to have ride cymbal or anything, and I didn't want to have like drum stuff in the track yet, because I wanted the track to grow somewhere. So I recorded these bottle caps that I have on this little string, and it sounds pretty great. Here's how it sounded. So much of what I do when I record from my home studio is not just drums, but it's cymbal swells and percussion and little elements like those bottle caps. So it's really important to stop thinking like a drummer and start thinking more like a producer, and start thinking in sounds and textures instead of drums. So we're talking about recording drums, and we're talking about recording drums for people's music. And when you have music, you need to record it, get all that done, but then it has to get out into the world, which is why I want to talk to you today about DistroKid. They are the sponsor of this video. DistroKid is a platform that allows you to put your music out online into the various stores and streaming services. They are the service that I personally use to put out my Metric Deception project. As well, many of the producers and artists I work with upload their music using DistroKid. Why I'm talking about DistroKid today is because DistroKid has a new feature called Hyperfollow. Hyperfollow gives you the ability to have one link and nest all the things that you need to have for that release in one place, which is really important. On platforms like Instagram, in your bio, you only get one link that you can put in your bio. So it's really, really valuable to be able to have one link that gets people anywhere they need to go to listen to your music. Some other cool things about Hyperfollow: the instant that you finish uploading at DistroKid, you can start collecting pre-saves for Spotify and other different platforms you can release the music on, and you can also capture the emails of the people pre-saving your release. But Hyperfollow also automatically changes all the links over once your release goes out, so that you have one link that people click, and if it's pre-save, they're seeing all the pre-save stuff, and if it's after the release goes out, it automatically turns over. That page shows all of the links to stream the song now that it's finally out. Hyperlink is just one of the awesome benefits of using DistroKid to get your music out there. So there's a link in the description to sign up for DistroKid, and if you sign up there, I get a little kickback, and you also save 7% on your first year's membership. Mistake number 3 is not knowing how to program. And what I mean by program is not physically play drums, but pull together samples and sounds to program by hand or by MIDI controller a drum part that's comprised of maybe samples of real drums or electronic sounding percussion elements. There's 2 songs that I recorded on last year. There's entire drum parts that I actually programmed. The song didn't need full drums yet, but it needed some kind of percussion. It needed some kind of groove. So in one of the examples, instead of playing hi-hat, I added a little rhythmic percussive thing that's like it's tapping on a keyboard. And then in another example, there's a whole section where instead of using real drum sounds, I pulled in some samples and built a drum loop type feel. It's really, really important that these days you know how to program drum parts, program percussion parts, as well as have access to different samples, MIDI, and the ability to, again, craft sounds that groove, as opposed to always thinking about how can I play something on drums. Mistake number 4 that drummers make when they start recording drums at home is they think too much in one take. Now, I'll say it's really important to be able to play drums and perform what you need to perform on drums. That's a certain kind of skill, and it is important, and it does make recording at home much, much easier if you have the ability to play the song down in one take. But these days, especially when you're recording at home, it's really important to not limit yourself to one take and think more in layers. Pretty much every song I played only last year has different layers. Sometimes I'm doing a full drum pass, and then I'm doing some tom overdubs that's playing at the same time as those drums, and then I'm doing some cymbal swells over top of it. It's thinking in layers. A lot of drummers, when they first start recording, they go, oh, I can't play cymbals there because my hands are busy doing this other part. Do it in a different take, make it a new layer. There's a song called Ascent, and around like the 1.5 minute mark, there's brushes going on, there's also cymbals, and then there's like swells going on. There's 3 different elements that I could never play all at once in one take. But when I break it out into layers and record each separately, it all adds up to a cool percussive orchestral sounding thing. This is kind of like the point over and over and over again is stop thinking like a drummer. Mistake number 5 that drummers start making when they're recording drums at home, and I'm guilty of this, is they make things too complicated. So many of our favorite grooves by our legendary drummers that we love, the Purdy Shuffle, the Picaro Shuffle, John Bonham, all these people we think of, a lot of times when we're thinking about great studio performances, we're thinking about complex drum parts that have stood the test of time. When in reality, a lot of songs, all it needs is a little bit of 2 and 4 here and there, and a 4 on the floor kick drum. Don't overthink it. Don't make it needlessly complicated. Just because you've heard a drum part 50 times that day doesn't mean the audience who's going to consume that song 5 months from now has heard that drum part at all. You don't want to rely on cheap tricks or always playing the exact same drum part for every song. Even if you take the same exact drum groove, when you put it in context of different songs, it might not hit you the same. If you think about the basic rock beat 101, that's in almost every single AC/DC song, and that's also in a ton of songs like Michael Jackson. Even though it's the same drum groove, it sounds very, very different because of the sonic choices and because of the music that gives the groove context around those drum beats. Sometimes because you're tired of playing the same old groove or whatever, you can reach for something more complex that actually ends up just getting in the way of the music because you didn't want to play that thing you always play, when sometimes that's actually the right decision.